The Rothschild Dynasty is often regarded as the most powerful and wealthiest family in modern history. Their fortune is rumored to range from $400 billion to $2 trillion, with substantial shares in major global corporations. Yet, very few people know the individual members of the family. The dynasty began in 1760 when Meyer Amschel Rothschild started his banking business that would dominate Europe. He sent his 5 sons to establish banks in the major financial centers of Frankfurt, London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples, creating an international network that allowed the family to control capital across borders. Their banking houses helped shape the modern financial system and the rise of capitalism. By the 1800s, their financial network was so strong that they financed African colonization and even controlled major American banks from Europe. After Britain's victory over Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo, the Rothschilds' capital grew immensely. From 1813 to 15, Nathan Meyer Rothschild almost single-handedly financed Britain's war efforts by providing Britain's continental allies with £100 million in loans. Throughout the 19th century, the Rothschilds provided massive loans to governments and funded key developments such as Portugal's support for Brazil's independence in 1820. Their influence also stretched into mining, energy, real estate, and wine. During World War I, they are said to have invested heavily in the weapons and military equipment industries. Reports claim that they profited immensely by supplying both the Allied and Central Powers with arms and medical supplies. In 1938, Baron Louis Nathaniel Rothschild was arrested by the Gestapo during the reunion with Austria, imprisoned for about a year, and had his fortune confiscated. The family negotiated his release by paying a massive ransom. After the war, they benefited further by lending to defeated nations and investing in the reconstruction of the victors. The Rothschild family has also provided large loans to the British government and holds significant shares in the Suez Canal, a key route for global trade. Their secrecy has fueled endless myths, from claims of controlling world banks to conspiracies linking them to global conflicts, but none of these have ever been proven. The Rockefeller family. John D. Rockefeller was born in New York to William Rockefeller, a conman who sold fake miracle cures. In 1870, John founded Standard Oil, seizing the growing oil demand. Via aggressive tactics, secret deals, and the elimination of rivals, he built a monopoly that controlled nearly 90% of US oil production, making Standard Oil the most dominant corporation in the world. By the time antitrust laws forced the company's breakup in 1911, Rockefeller had already become the world's first billionaire and one of the richest people in history, with a fortune equivalent to over $300 billion today. Despite the public outrage over his ruthless business methods, he turned much of his wealth toward philanthropy, funding universities, hospitals, and scientific research through the Rockefeller Foundation. However, the foundation was linked to the Eugenic Society of Sao Paulo, which promoted racial improvement policies. The family also faced criticism for maintaining ties with companies like IG Farben, which supported Nazi Germany's war industry. Later generations continued to shape American business and politics, with figures like Nelson Rockefeller serving as US vice president. Yet scandals followed the family, from personal affairs to mysterious deaths, fueling speculation about their reach and secrecy. Although their collective wealth has declined, the Rockefellers remain deeply connected to America's most powerful institutions. The Medici were a powerful Italian banking and political family that ruled Florence and Tuscany for centuries. They built their fortune through trade before funding the Medici Bank, which became the most influential bank in Europe during the 15th century, practicing predatory lending under founder Vieri. Their wealth gave them immense political power, allowing them to dominate Florence's government, judges, and ambassadors. The family also turned Florence into the heart of the Renaissance, using their fortune to fund art, architecture, and sciences. They funded Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Galileo, and financed landmarks such as the Uffizi Gallery or St. Peter's Basilica. They also fueled innovations like the piano. The Medici influence then extended further. They produced 4 popes and 2 queens of France, Catherine de Medici and Marie de Medici, who shaped European politics through marriage and diplomacy. The family also played key roles in the Counter-Reformation. By the 18th century, however, the Medici line had weakened. Their wealth and influence declined, and when Giangastone de' Medici died without an heir in 1737, the dynasty came to an end, with Tuscany passing to the House of Habsburg Lorraine. Still, some believe their influence influence in the Vatican never truly disappeared. The Borgia family was a Spanish noble lineage that rose to power during the Italian Renaissance, becoming one of the most notorious dynasties in history. Originating from Valencia, they gained power in the 15th century through their influence in the Catholic Church and Italian politics, producing two popes, Calixtus III and his nephew Alexander VI. Under Pope Alexander, the family's power reached its peak, but so did their infamy, as they were accused of corruption, bribery, murder, and even incest. Alexander VI openly fathered several children, including the infamous Cesare and Lucrezia Borgia. Cesare led brutal military campaigns to carve out his own state in central Italy, while Lucrezia's life became the center of scandal and rumor, including accusations of incest that were likely fueled by political enemies such as the Medici. The Borgias were also accused of poisoning rivals, hosting scandalous orgies like the Banquet of Chestnuts, and using church power for personal gain. Despite their dark reputation, the Borgias were patrons of the arts who helped shape Renaissance culture. Some historians argue their infamy was exaggerated by anti-Spanish propaganda. After Alexander's death, the family's influence quickly declined, and by the 18th century their name had faded. The Morgan family rose to power through banking, with John Pierpont Morgan establishing J.P. Morgan & Company, one of the most influential financial institutions in history. During the 1893 financial crisis, Morgan led a syndicate that included the Rothschilds to buy back gold from foreign investors, stabilizing the US economy. This move gave him immense control over the nation's gold reserves and, by extension, over the economy itself. Morgan used his power to finance major industrial giants like US Steel and General Electric, consolidating industries and eliminating competition through aggressive takeovers. By cutting wages, firing workers, and ignoring safety, he maximized profits. Later, Chase National Bank, part of the Morgan legacy, maintained business ties with Nazi Germany. In modern times, JP Morgan Chase has been accused of contributing to the 2008 global financial crash through predatory lending and reckless behavior. The DuPont family began with a French aristocrat who emigrated to the United States in the early 1800s and founded a gunpowder company that soon became the largest supplier to the US military. Even after their monopoly was dismantled under antitrust laws in the early 1900s, DuPont continued to dominate, supplying about 40% of the Allied forces' ammunition during World War I. Over time, DuPont was involved in almost every chemical-related industry, but everything changed in 1938 when their chemist Dr. Plunkett discovered Teflon, a material that would later be used to coat tanks and military vehicles for World War II. In World War II, DuPont worked closely with the US government, producing plutonium for the Manhattan Project and later contributing to the hydrogen bomb program in the 1950s. The family's vast influence extended into agriculture and automotive, with major holdings in General Motors and Pioneer Hybrid, now Corteva, a leading producer of pesticides and genetically modified seeds. To this day, the DuPonts have influence in many industries. The Habsburg family was one of the most powerful dynasties in European history, ruling much of Central and Eastern Europe for nearly 6 centuries. Originating in Switzerland, the family rose to prominence after settling in Austria in the late 13th century. The Habsburgs built an empire that stretched from Austria to Spain and across the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Their dominance was secured through strategic marriages, territorial expansion, and the acquisition of key political positions. From 1438 to 1806, they had a near monopoly on the title of Holy Roman Emperor, using it to shape European politics. The peak of their power came under Charles V, whose empire spanned much of Europe and the New World. However, their obsession with preserving wealth and bloodlines led to generations of inbreeding, resulting in genetic disorders and the infamous Habsburg jaw, or the most powerful chins in the world. Eventually, Charles V split the empire into Austrian and Spanish branches to make governance easier, but it weakened unity. Religious wars and political upheavals further eroded their dominance. By World War I, the Habsburg Empire was collapsing under the weight of nationalism and military defeat. The Bush family is one of America's most prominent dynasties, producing 2 US presidents and holding influence in politics, finance, and global affairs since the 1950s. Their rise began with Prescott Bush, a banker and senator accused of profiting from World War II through ties with companies linked to Nazi Germany. He reportedly held investments in a Polish firm that used forced labor from Auschwitz, though he later distanced himself and raised funds for war victims. Declassified documents released decades later revived questions about his wartime dealings. Prescott's legacy laid the foundation for his son George H.W. Bush, who served as vice president, CIA director, and later as US president. His presidency was marked by the Gulf War, a decision influenced by Britain and global politics. His son, George W. Bush, became the 43rd president, leading the country through the 9/11 attacks and initiating wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, both of which drew criticism for benefiting oil interests. The House of Orsini was one of the most powerful noble families in medieval and Renaissance Italy. Originating in Rome, the Orsini family produced 5 popes, plus dozens of cardinals and military leaders. Their wealth, vast estates across central Italy, and control of private armies allowed them to rival other great Roman dynasties for dominance. The Orsini's strength came from their close ties to the Catholic Church and their strategic marriages that connected them to Europe's most powerful royal houses, like the Bourbons, Habsburgs, and Savoys. They were part of the so-called Black Nobility, elite Roman families that backed the papacy's political rule over the Papal States. In later centuries, the family's power declined due to territorial losses and internal conflicts, though their influence lingered. One of their last major historical moments came with Felice Orsini's failed assassination attempt on Napoleon III in 1858. In modern conspiracy theories, Pepe Orsini is often described as the Grey Pope, a supposed hidden power within the Vatican and secret societies. The House of Windsor is the current royal family of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms. It was founded in 1917 when King George V changed the family name from the German Saxe, Coburg and Gotha to Windsor due to anti-German sentiment in World War I. The Windsors inherited a legacy that stretched back centuries through the houses of Hanover and Stuart, and ultimately from Queen Victoria, whose reign helped shape global politics, industry and colonialism. At its peak, the British Empire under the royal family ruled over a quarter of the world's land, making it the largest in history. King George V guided the monarchy through World War I, granting women the right to vote and overseeing the creation of the Commonwealth of Nations. George VI later led Britain through World War II with Churchill. Queen Elizabeth II, who reigned for 7 decades, turned the monarchy into a global symbol of stability and diplomacy, maintaining influence through the Commonwealth of 56 nations. Today, under King Charles III, the House of Windsor remains wealthy and culturally powerful, with assets around $28 billion. However, its political power is largely symbolic. The House of Saud is the ruling royal family of Saudi Arabia, founded in the mid-1700s. It's an absolute monarchy led by the king, who holds full control over law and national governance. The family has around 15,000 members, but real power is concentrated among 2,000. Their rise to global power began in 1938 with the discovery of oil beneath Saudi land. Through ownership of Saudi Aramco, one of the most valuable companies in the world, the family built a fortune, estimated at over $1 trillion. Their oil reserves grant them major leverage in global energy markets and politics. King Abdul Aziz solidified the current kingdom and forged alliances post-World War II, notably meeting with Roosevelt and Churchill. Today, the House of Saud's power comes from its vast wealth and influence over the Islamic world through its guardianship of Mecca and Medina. The Ambani family is one of the most powerful business dynasties in Asia, founded by Dhirubhai Ambani in 1966, when he transformed a small textile firm into Reliance Industries, a multinational conglomerate. After Dhirubhai's death in 2002, son Mukesh took control of Reliance, which under his leadership grew into one of the most valuable companies in Asia. The family controls assets exceeding $110 billion, with major stakes in industries that influence India's economy and its global trade networks. The Ambanis have close ties to Indian political leadership, and Mukesh frequently appears at the World Economic Forum. The family has faced allegations of cronyism, political favoritism, and market manipulation. Reliance also imports 42% of India's Russian oil, showing its geopolitical leverage. The Romanov Dynasty ruled Russia from 1613 until the Revolution of 1917. Their rise began when Anastasia Romanovna married Ivan the Terrible, Russia's first crowned Tsar. Their power rested on absolute rule and a close alliance with the Russian Orthodox Church, which upheld their claim as divinely appointed. The Romanovs under Peter the Great modernized the country, built a navy, and in 1721 declared it the Russian Empire. Catherine the Great expanded the territory through wars against the Ottoman Empire and the partition of Poland. Later rulers like Alexander I solidified Russia's strength, playing a key role in defeating Napoleon. By the late 19th century, however, the empire began to decline. Industrialization lagged behind Western powers, inequality deepened, and revolutionary ideas spread. Nicholas II, the final Tsar, failed to adapt, clinging to autocracy despite mounting unrest. His poor leadership led to defeat in the Russo-Japanese War, unrest in the 1905 revolution, and disastrous involvement in World War I, which crippled the economy and eroded trust. The 1917 Russian Revolution forced Nicholas II to abdicate, ending the Romanov Dynasty. A year later, the Tsar, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children were brutally executed by the Bolsheviks. Descendants from other branches of the Romanov family still survive today. The House of Bourbon was a major royal house that originated from the Ka-shing Dynasty of France. It emerged in the 13th century when Robert, the youngest son of King Louis IX, married the heiress of Bourbon. The family rose to become one of Europe's most powerful ones, ruling France, Spain, Naples, and later Sicily, Parma, and Luxembourg. The dynasty reached its peak under Louis XIV, the Sun King, who built Versailles and established France as Europe's leading power through absolute monarchy and centralization of authority. The French Revolution ended Bourbon rule in 1793 with the execution of Louis XVI. Though briefly restored after Napoleon's defeat, the Bourbons could not reverse the revolutionary changes. When Charles X was overthrown in 1830, their reign in France ended permanently. However, a Spanish branch of the Bourbons, established in 1700, survived these upheavals and continues to rule today, with King Felipe VI as the current monarch. The Krupp family rose in 16th century Essen to become one of the most powerful industrial dynasties in history. Arndt Krupp laid the foundation in 1587 by trading property, and his descendants expanded into gunmaking and mining. In the Napoleonic era, Friedrich Karl Krupp established the Gussstahlfabrik in 1811, pioneering cast steel production in Germany. Under his son Alfred, the firm became Europe's largest steel and arms producer by the late 1800s, supplying weapons to Prussia's unification wars and exporting to dozens of countries. By the early 20th century, Krupp had grown into Germany's biggest industrial conglomerate, producing ships, tanks, and artillery that fueled both world wars and heavily influencing German policy under Bismarck and beyond. During the Nazi era, the company became the backbone of Hitler's rearmament campaign, using over 100,000 forced laborers in its factories. After the war, Alfred Krupp was convicted at Nuremberg but served only 3 years before being pardoned and regaining his assets. He rebuilt the company into a giant that helped power West Germany's recovery, moving toward heavy engineering and steel production. In 1999, the company merged with Thyssen to form ThyssenKrupp AG, one of the world's leading engineering groups. The Ka-shing family wields immense power through its control of CK Group, a global conglomerate. Ka-shing's rise began after fleeing to Hong Kong in 1940 as a refugee from mainland China. Starting as a factory worker, he founded Cheong Kong in 1950 to manufacture plastics, later shifting to real estate. By the 1990s, Lee was the richest man in Asia. Today, the family's total fortune exceeds $50 billion. Through CK Hutchison, the family controls a network of over 50 ports worldwide and major assets in global telecommunications and energy with geopolitical weight. A 2025 sale of Panama port stakes to a US-backed consortium drew criticism from Beijing.